1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, and welcome back to It's Not a Sport, Season 3. Lucky number is 13 for me and my family. I really think I love that number. So, of course, this is going to be a very good episode. I think I got a very interesting and enlightening talk this week. We're going to talk about the 4. So if you don't know what those are, make sure to stay tuned for that. And of course, as always, we're just going to talk about the news for this week, being the Ubisoft press conference that came around, and of course, esports, which we are going to hop into. So in esports, starting with League of Legends in the LPL, which is China, we have Top Esports being 8-1 in first, followed by Victory 5 and JD Gaming in second. Then we have Team Victus and Sunning all tied for fourth. Royals Never Give Up, LGD Gaming, Vinci Gaming, and Fun Plus are all tied for 7th. 11th is Edward Gaming and Billy B Gaming. 13th is 14th is E-Star, 15th is LNG Esports and Rogue Warriors, and then 17th, last place in LPL, is Dominus Esports. In Korea, we have Dragon X in first place, being 7-1. Gen G and Damwon in second, tied for second. We have T1 in fourth. Afrika Freaks in fifth. Team Dynamic in 6th, Sandbox Gaming and KT Roster in 7th, Seoul Heal 1 Prince in 9th, and Hanwha Life Esports in 10th place, being last place. In LEC, we have Warriors and Mad Lions tied for first. G2 and Misfits tied for third. SK Gaming, Origins, Excel, Fnatic, and Team Vitality all tied for 5th in the middle of the pack. Block 04 at the bottom. In LCS, which is the North American League, which if you're watching this week, we had some bangers of games, really just chaotic all over the place. Cloud9 won this week, and they are currently sitting at 9-1 in first place. Then we have Team Liquid 8-2, TSM 6 wins and 4 losses in third. Evil Geniuses, COG, and FlyQuest all at 4th place. Golden Guardians and 100 Thieves tied for 7th, and Immortal and Dignitas tied for 9th. Now I just want to let you guys know, and this is like I think a really bad product and just how weird NA is structured regions, and I just want to like talk about this for a sec. I do plan to do a full esports episode, but like I've been negating this. I've been watching these games a lot more recently, and just the quality of the games. NA is a best of 1 region. LCK and China aren't, right? So we're not even at the level of Europe to be able to be best of 1 as good as them, but they are. So they on average will always play more games than us, you know, and Europe's quality of teams is better. So they just because they're better than us. Though LCK is franchising later at the end of this year, so they'll probably move to a best of 1 format as well. Who knows? Then if we look at our teams, right, how it's split. So spring split meant nothing, meaning if you won that split, you didn't get championship points in order to move to worlds, and you didn't get the only reason to win that split is to go to MSI, which obviously didn't happen because of COVID. We're here, right? And out of all these teams that I named, right, 8 of them get to go to playoffs. 8. I told my dad what was his number of playoffs. He just said 6. You know, that's probably a good cutoff point. With 10 teams total, probably 5 should go to playoffs, right? Or 6. But 8 fucking teams. That means these bottom 2 teams right now tie for 9th, being Immortals 2-8 and Dignitas are the ones that aren't making it. But everyone else being 4-6, 4-6, 5-5, 5-5, get to go. So like the region as a whole and the system is broken. Do I know how to fix the system? Maybe I have on later episode, but these are just problems that I think to bring to light because these games are hard and the esports scene really needs to push forward in order to grow because I'm a huge supporter of it. All right, so moving on, Overwatch League, something I'm a little less knowledgeable about. Having the summer showdown, probably just like their MSI. So I'm going to do the brackets. We have Los Angeles. So in the knockout stages, which happened July 3rd, we had Los Angeles Gladiators versus Toronto. Toronto won. We have Los Gladiators versus Washington. Washington won. So there goes LA. We have Florida versus Houston. Houston won. Eternal Paris versus Dallas. And Paris won. We had San Francisco versus Washington. San Francisco won. Vancouver versus Paris. Paris won. Philadelphia versus Houston. Philly won. Atlanta versus Toronto. Toronto won. We had San Francisco versus Paris. Paris won. Philadelphia versus Toronto. Philly won. And in the finals, we had Paris versus Philly, where Paris ended up winning. So congratulations to Paris, and that's the North American bracket. In the we had Shanghai versus nobody, so they just automatically moved forward to semifinals. London Spitfires versus Seoul Dynasty. Seoul Dynasty won. Chengdu Chargers versus Chengdu Hunters. Guangzhou Chargers won. New York versus Hangzhou. New York won. Then in semifinals, we had Shanghai versus Seoul. Shanghai won. Guangzhou Chargers versus New York. And then when Shanghai versus Chargers in the finals, the Chargers won. And overall in the Overwatch League, the current standings are Shanghai Dragons, Philly, Guangzhou, Francisco, New York, Paris, Florida Mayhem, Florida Valiant, Seoul Dynasty, Atlanta, Hangzhou, Los Angeles Gladiators, London, Houston, Toronto, Dallas, Vancouver, Washington, and Boston is in last place, which the next games being this weekend. In terms of games that are out and came out this week, we have Death Stranding that came on the PC on July 14th. Rocket Arena came out. It's a kind of Rocket TF2 battle simulator. Ghost of Tsushima comes out this weekend on Friday. We have Dying Light Herald coming out on the 23rd. Rock of Ages 3. Nothing's huge, super. Next big title is, of course, Ghost of Tsushima, which I think at current times of talking about this has some really good, decent reviews. And then the big kind of remake PlayStation titles that come in PC will being Death Stranding and Horizon Zero Dawn will be relatively soon. And then we have the Crysis remake for the Switch that comes out soon as well, which got a lot of backlash. But that's a story for later on when we get closer to that release date. So look forward to that. Now let's talk about Ubisoft and really what they had going for them at their press conference. Really, me growing up, I liked Ubisoft's games, and I liked what they did with Assassin's Creed a lot. Up to Black Flag were really cool, really inspirational, and they are like set in their time periods in history as well as the cool mystic side of things, and how time has gone on, especially with especially what franchises they have now. Ubisoft is one of my least favorite companies and least favorite publishers. I would rather play EA. EA puts better quality games and better, more interesting titles out. So does Activision. And also if you don't know right now, I'm going to hit you with this right now. Ubisoft has been going through a lot of sexual misbehaviors and inappropriate behaviors within their company. A lot of top people at Ubisoft, being at the Toronto studio or other studios. It's a really long list just from like talking about it. Is just they all have some sort of sexual misconduct thing. This article on the BBC News posted July 3rd just talking about how multiple studio heads and multiple people have come up and they've done nothing about it. So they're under a lot of fire for this. A lot of people are resigning. They didn't talk about it at all. Their press conferences, which is a little awkward to see these guys, talk about this, and they didn't address this at all. But I feel like a lot of people probably don't know this is going on. I didn't really know it was going on until a couple days ago until I looked into it. But it's stuff. But like a lot of top brass at that company are just being hit. This has been ongoing for a while. I know Game of Sutra did an article on it. So this has been an ongoing issue of just inappropriate behavior. And like if you thought that the problems with culture and inappropriate behavior were bad when that happened around last year, this is on a different scale. Just to be get that in your head. Anyway, let's get into some of the game stuff that they talked about. I'm gonna this random shit they talked about, like Just Dance, the pre-show, like The Crew, Ghost Recon, right? They did some indie games they showed off. Trackmania they showed off as a pre-show. Padala to mobile. There's a lot of small stuff like that. Because we're running out of time, I want to get to the main talk. We're just going to talk about the three things that like sat with me the most. Watch Dogs Legions, so that's what they kind of opened the show with, was Watch Dogs. It looks good. Watch Dogs is one of their fresher titles. This would be the third game in the Watch Dogs franchise, and I hope it looks good. I think the idea of them, if you being able to switch over to whoever character, it's going to be very interesting to see how they accomplish that. That's the only feature that I really am looking forward to. The problem with that and these type of games, it's a very political story. Obviously, it's very inspired by Brexit and like Trump, how he handles this country in London. So it's a very political heavy story, which I don't know will sit too well with gamers so much. Generally, we don't, especially companies, don't like to think about political things so much. So it's very good and interesting to see like how the story works out like that. But it's your basic story, kind of like, oh, government went to shit, now it's private army that runs things. Spider-Man did it in its DLC. Infamous, or it's standard shit like that. So it's going to be interesting to see what it does. My problem with these type of games is, yeah, they look fun, but they're really just discount GTA. And at this point, you could just play GTA, mod it, Red Dead Redemption. It's just better quality as a whole in Rockstar's type of open world games than Ubisoft's. So I'm looking forward to see what it does. But the character switch feature is obviously something that really impressed me, just from like how they just even did that. Next up, they talked about Hyperscape a little bit. If you don't know what Hyperscape is, it kind of went under the radar. It's Ubisoft's like battle royale. It's very, very mobile battle royale. It's been doing well. It looks a lot of fun. They just talked about the asset as an open beta. A lot of people, streamers, have been playing it. I think one of the cool things that I saw from this, at least, was that they made it so Twitch streamers, your viewers, could interact with the map a little bit, which I thought was really cool. So it's interesting to see how that grows. Next up are two games that are pretty much can be put in the same category, and this honestly can do a whole show on itself, is Assassin's Creed Valhalla and Far Cry 6. People like the new Assassin's Creed format. I played not Odyssey, Origins, and I just could not get behind it. Like, it's not good. To me, Assassin's Creed after Black Flag died for me, because these new ones aren't good. They are mystical stories and all that, like the cool kind of lore stuff. Like, now it's very mystical. You're fighting like Medusa in the last game and all that. Like, this one's very weird, where it's Assassin's Creed Viking, which seems cool. It's something they never really done. They've always stuck with this weird like trade boat thing, but it's something they never really done, exploring that types of mythology. But like honestly, it just TV show Viking and just made it an Assassin's Creed game. But it's like so political that it's like, well, what happened to the overall story of Assassin's Creed where like the Templars and all that, and you're looking for the Apple of Eden. Now it's basically Far Cry, you know. Games for the last couple of games have just been this country's gone to shit. It's a third world country. It's an outlaw country. You're some survivor in this country. Survive. That's all Far Cry has. And Assassin's Creed has turned into the same thing. Essentially, what I'm saying, and because I want to move on to the real talk, both games look good. They're definitely worth the pickup. They're definitely worth the money. My problem is that Far Cry and Assassin's Creed have become a franchise. They're exactly the same. No matter how you look at it, they are just the same type of game, and they just develop differently. So anyway, with that being said, I definitely think like Far Cry 6, I talk about Assassin's Creed. There's gameplay of Assassin's Creed out there now, so you could go check that out, get your thoughts of it. Far Cry didn't have gameplay. It was just kind of an announcement trailer. It's set for February 21, 2020, so next year, which is good. And then Assassin's Creed, I believe, this year. So some cool stuff. Check it out. But do take note, and as a designer and as someone who plays these games, that they are the same game from a very design heavy focus point, and that's just how they're just very obviously they're having fun, molesting people over there, and then they're also just like lost their groove. They lost their inspiration to make games, which is very sad because they made some games. Even one game that I'm waiting for is that game with like the space monkey, and they're saying like, oh, artists can put their artists in the game that they're talking about. For a long time, people are like, oh, they're making a sequel to this game. I forget the name of it right now, but it's been forever since that. Anyway, the news, the talk, anyway, all that, blah blah blah. Let's get into our main talk, talking about the 4 pillars of design right now. So this week's talk, I've been wanting to do this talk for a while. I think it's a very interesting talk, and a talk that people who are interested in game design and how games are made should know in general. And it's about the design pillars. Essentially, we're going to go over what design pillars are, what they're there for, what they do, but essentially what they are is they're the foundation for every video game. And no matter what game, it's to Tetris to League of Legends, no matter how complicated it is, they have these pillars in place to work as guidelines when they are designing the game. And they are just like really important factors. Generally, you will not spot them. They're not that obvious because even though they're like, if you think of a foundation, it's one pillar, but then it's holding up multiple things, or the things within that one pillar. So they're not generally obvious. But to give examples of what a design pillar is, we can look at the games such as The Last of Us, right? The Last of Us is, we can all say, a survival horror story game, right? So story drives it. Horror and the zombies drives it. The sort of your partner, the AI, the bot, also drives it. Crafting's a big factor, so we can look and we can analyze The Last of Us, and there's a good Game Sutra article about this, and essentially say the 4 pillars of The Last of Us, because generally they either pick 4 or 3 pillars to go with, are crafting. Crafting's a big part of The Last of Us. You're collecting resources in order to craft shivs and pipe bombs and molotovs. Then we have the story. Those games are very heavy narrative game, so of course the story is a big factor in the design of the game, because it's designed around the chapters and the story beats. And then we have the AI part. in the first Last of Us, your relationship with Ellie is a really big factor. I think those kind of tie into story as well, but it is a super big factor, and it's a design pillar that the developers feel attached to Ellie and grow with Ellie in some shape or form. And then we have stealth being the last one. Is kind of the combat pillar, you can say, but stealth is kind of a part of the it if you want to stealth your way past the zombies rather than face them head on, even though they do give the option of doing that. And if you look at The Last of Us, those are the pillars. That's what the game is built. That's the foundation of the game. At the core, it's survival, story based, survival crafting, story based. AI, I think, is skeptical, but it's there with kind of mix of story. Game, zombie horror game. That's what it is. Now we can move on to another example, which won best of game of the year in 2017, Breath of the Wild, right? Breath of the Wild is old exploration game. It's meant for the players to explore the world and do what they want to do within this big open play space. So what are the design pillars behind Breath of the Wild? Well, gameplay loops of Breath of the Wild, of course, is exploration. There's tons of little hidden treasure chests underneath the ground, places where you're supposed to go, places where you can't go, places where you need certain gear in order to go. And that's like a huge pillar of Breath of the Wild. Then we have the second big pillar, which is traversal. The game wants you to explore more, and this is where I think we get more to the idea of sub pillars, but we'll talk about that a little later. But the game wants you to explore more, and so it makes you climb mountains. You can cut down trees to make bridges, and build a boat or a horse. It just traversing this humongous world and exploring it. The second big option or pillars that they decided to go with was, at the other side, Breath of the Wild is really heavy on the explorations, but on the other side, it's also really heavy on combat. So we have scavenging. They decided that they wanted, with the exploration, they wanted players to scavenge weapons. They wanted players to scavenge food items, so they can make food. And in Breath of the Wild, there is a lot of collecting. No matter what you do, you're going to find something to collect. If you cut down a tree, you get a branch. If you kill an enemy, you get arrows, or you get a sword. You have to go scavenge for a new one. And that's a big pillar of Breath of the Wild. And then lastly, of course, is the combat pillar, where they wanted a good combat. You can also say that in the Zelda format as a whole, and the Zelda franchise of design pillars, puzzles are definitely a big one. I don't think the puzzles in Breath of the Wild, that was not their main pillars going in, but it is definitely probably a sub pillar and something to take note of. So that's a good example of those two games, design pillars being central around your game to build something else. And then the last example I want to go over, which we can get more into kind of sub pillars a little bit more, is God of War, right? Sony posted an article on their blog about God of War's pillars, and they have 3. The first one, and I'm talking about God of War, the fourth one that came out in 2018. So the first one, combat. Combat's a huge part of God of War. Pretty much the entire game. It's a hack and slash game, so they wanted combat to be one of their pillars, and it is. Then we had the father and son relationship between Kratos and Atreus, his son, or boy as he's more famously known. They wanted the players to feel that connection within their story, and that the player as Kratos has a connection to his son. They wanted the player to experience that connection, which you beats of the game. And then you have exploration, where they wanted the game to have, you explore the world a little bit and you gather resources. And it's God of War is a fairly linear game, but there are points where does come into play. Now, within those three pillars, there are now subgenres, or little pillars, or sub pillars, as I like to call them. So we have in combat, right? New mythical creatures, new and close, high optical mocap fertility, and integrating a companion, right? So they kind of all tie into each other now. So in God of War, you have all these new mythical creatures that you fight from Norse mythology. You have the option to play close range with your axe and the chaos blades, and you have the option to throw your axe and play range, or somewhat mid range. It's not super range, but yes, you have the option. Your companion is the boy. He's very big part of combat later on, where he will stun enemies for you, and he'll deal damage, and he's a big part of integrated combat, but and also exploration as well. Then we have the father-son category, right? We have humanized Kratos. They wanted to humanize him and show that, at the end of the day, Kratos is a person. If you played the previous God of Wars, he's angry, and he's pretty overpowered. Now they want to bring him down a level, humanize him, and show people that he is a human being, and then the second one, they have father teaches son, son teaches father. Son, and the third, not hinder the player. Third, son will be believable. And three, symbiotic relationship. So in this father-son pillar, they really want to show, how Kratos teaches his son teaches Kratos multiple things, and we see that within the story. How they really want the son not to be annoying, which is funny that they put that there. And of course, I think that's always a big part when you do games like this. And of course, I don't think at all. They want him to be believable, and he is believable as a character. We see him go through multiple struggles. One of the big point for me, if you haven't played the game, is a point where, of course, he finds out that he is also a god, and he gets very cocky. You can't do this, and the son gets punished for it. So there's things like that. And then in the exploration pillar, we have discovery, resource gathering, hunt and make, father and son bonding, and engagement. And that's definitely there. It's pretty standard. If you play any game, you discover new things and new areas, or new secrets, hunting, and there is kind of a hunting aspect to the game. Gather resources. That's actually a big part of God of War, to upgrade your gear. There is a lot of father-son bonding in the exploration, where they're just talking, or they just need to get to a new location together, and you do celebrate that. So why are these pillars so important, right? Now that I've gone over them and talked about them, and we got to understanding what they are. It's when you're building a building, or when you're building anything, a chair, the legs in order to stand up properly, and then you have your base. So when you're making a script, right, the same thing for script writing. If you're making a movie has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It knows what it's want to do. What pillars are in game design is they are the foundation, they are the blueprint to any game that you are making, and they often change a lot. League of Legends is a prime example of that, on how many of their pillars have changed. Their core pillar, I believe, has stayed the same, which is, a MOBA game, a mobile arena game. But and with the growth of technology and design, we can see that their design of champions, that pillar has changed a lot. Their design of how they want to balance the game has changed, how the game wants to look, and their pillars have changed. So they do change can change, but you want them not to change too much, because at the end of the day they are still the blueprint for everything. And the reason why I really want to do this talk, and not just from a game design standpoint, but that pillars everywhere, even not just in game design. I just mentioned movies, and with the beginning, middle, and end in script writing, those are pillars. They're still pillars. I just when you're making a chair, again, I just mentioned that. Those, even your own personal plans, excuse me, and you as a person and what you want to do, you still have your own pillars, because those are the blueprints of what you are and what you want to do. So I hope this talk has been, to you guys. I think it's very interesting to just try and decipher pillars of whether games and or movies or anything that you're interested in, and whether it's a book or anything, and just try to is the blueprint to that piece of media or that object that you are interested in. But anyway, that's going to conclude this week's talk on game design pillars. I hope you episode of It's Not a Sport. If you want to listen to all of our previous episodes, they're up on our YouTube channel. Make sure to check us out, our website as well, and our social media. It's Not a Sport to You, and it's Instagram, and it's notasport.com. A comment and subscribe. It always helps me stay motivated and listen, and feedback is very, very important to me, because I'm always trying to work and thinking about how to improve the show to the best, quality and production I possibly. This has been your host, Salty Waffles, signing off, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful climb.